Welcome along to another episode. I'm Ian Brannan and I'm joined by Kelvin Tatum as we look back on the 2024 Speedway of Nations. An action-packed week of Speedway at the National Speedway Stadium in Manchester with 4 events in total, the world's finest and some controversial moments. But the biggest news, of course, certainly for British Speedway fans, maybe not so much our Polish viewers, is the winners of the Speedway of Nations in 2024. And once again, the World Champions, the same 3 riders picking up those gold medals as well as the management team. Team Great Britain sealing it with a race-off against Australia in the grand final on Saturday night. But of course, there was many twists and turns to get to that point, and we'll talk about that, not least as well, the SON2, Speedway of Nations 2, which did bring some joy for Poland on Friday night. So, Kelvin, you were there. You've acclimatised back to the south after your trip to the northern regions. And, of course, it was typical Manchester weather for the week, which certainly added a different dimension to things, but fair play to the National Speedway Stadium and all the track staff. And I know that a lot of people have been crediting and bigging up the Bellevue track staff, quite rightly. But I should also point out as well that it was a track staff of nations. I've described this to someone else as well, because they did pull in people from around and about, not least Glasgow, some of the track guys from there, and Johnny Swales, formerly of Redcar as well, helping out to get this fixture on. And as we've discussed before we started recording this chat, that there's not many tracks in Britain, or indeed maybe in the world, that would have been able to handle some of the conditions thrown at them this week and then get on a world-class event.
Yes, certainly during the week, Tuesday and Wednesday, and again on Friday, the weather was really unpredictable. And as you rightly pointed out, a lot of credit goes to the staff and Andy Meredith and his cohorts, because I do believe that it could easily have lost a meeting, or you would have had a situation where one of the semi-finals was lost, or Tuesday night was lost, and then 2 having to be run on Wednesday, and then the week would have got really messy from that point of view. This year, in truth, weather has been really difficult around the country. But the National Speedway Stadium, the way it's designed, the material that's used, the expertise that they have there, they were able to get those events on. And in truth, even on Wednesday, which was wetter than Tuesday, the racing, incredibly, was actually still very good. So the 2 semi-finals, some of the racing on Friday for the Speedway of Nations 2 was difficult. There's no question about it. But, the amount they had even more rain on Friday. But semi-final number 1 got underway. Lots of expectations. Actually, although the crowd on Saturday night wasn't what everybody was expecting, the crowds actually during the week weren't desperate. I've seen far worse in Speedway World Cups and Speedway of Nations. The last time it was held in Denmark, for example, there was one man and his dog on Tuesday and Wednesday, where there was a reasonable amount of people in the stadium. But we got underway and the semi-finals were reasonably predictable. I think the major teams all got through. The 6 teams that we were looking at, maybe the second semi-final, we'll come on to that. But the first semi-final was Sweden winning. I thought they did very well. Poland, obviously, they never seem to have any good fortune, or it doesn't quite click for them, with obviously Smarzlik having that really tough crash with the Ukrainians. And that knocked him about. There's no doubt about it. That gave him a proper bang on the head. When you watch the slow-mos again, it was remarkable that he actually got himself back up and rode and won the rerun. And interestingly, then there were all sorts of conspiracy theories going around, because he didn't ride for the rest of the night and then he disappeared back to his homeland. People potentially saying that he was concussed and maybe he should have been set down for a week or 2. But no, Sweden, Poland and Germany going through in semi-final number 1. That was what was expected, but Freddie Lingman riding out of his skin, Kai Hülkenberg riding superbly well. It was still some good racing on Tuesday night.
Of course, Poland sort of started as many people's favourites, but the Speedway of Nations is not a tournament that they have they've never won it, and they always, as you say, have some kind of issue. Whereas when it's a team event, they seem to be a different kettle of fish, don't they? So they finished as runners up to Sweden, and then you had this battle between Germany, maybe fancied as the other team maybe that would get in and among it, but you never knew really with Finland, with Italy. Finland, of course, 10 points behind Germany, but they got themselves into that race off. Italy were only a couple of points behind, so there was, and France as well, not a million miles away. So it did get fairly close for that fourth spot, which gave you a one-off chance to get to the final.
Yeah, actually, during commentary, I was getting quite excited about Jesse Mustonen from Finland, because he was pulling some shapes out there that were just extraordinary. I don't know quite how long he's going to survive doing that, but he was going into parts of the National Speedway Stadium that no other rider has been, like popping the front wheel over the curb, and they were. I like their attitude because they turned up. They are complete underdogs. You can clearly see that they are on a budget because the equipment isn't quite as sparkling as some of the other teams. But by golly, do they have a good attitude, and they race. It would have been unfair on Germany if something untoward had happened in that Heat 22 to join the winners, or to join the top two rather. But because they had 10 points, as you rightly say, they had 10 points more. But I thoroughly enjoyed watching them. France were unfortunate to miss Berger. Berger with Balago, well, now, they may well have been finalists because those two fly around there, and I've seen them go really well there. They just very strange management from Laurent Sambray from France. Stephen Gore didn't get a point. And I'm thinking, well, he's surely got to use the young Trésor in one race. Got to put him in. And I actually spoke to his dad afterwards, and they all were scratching their heads. So I didn't really get that. I thought that was rather bizarre. But no, that's what the Speedway of Nations is all about, Ian, isn't it? That's what gives the lesser nations an opportunity to put themselves in the limelight, and they definitely contributed to the week, those lesser nations, no question.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And that is the beauty. If you're taking it over a squad of five, of course, the obvious nations come out of having the strength in depth, but the thinking behind the Speedway of Nations in some respect is that most nations can probably find two decent riders and at least mix it, and that's exactly what happened. Incidentally, Antti Vulas, who was the top scorer for Finland, he got 17 points on the night of the 23 that Finland got. He's actually bagged. Well, I think he got cancelled actually, but he bagged himself a guest spot with Bellevue. Because they've got a couple of injuries now, and so it certainly worked out well for Antti Vulas. Of course, they had signed Tate Zischke, who, he had a terrible crash on his debut for Bellevue. But Antti Vulas, also a rider at Workington as well, and he actually came third in the Ben Fund Bonanza behind Dan Bewley and Jan Kvek. So he had a good end to his week really as well. So maybe he's going to get a chance at the top level as well. But again, people like seeing riders that give it a go, don't they, Kelvin? Yeah. That's what you get. When we mentioned Jan Kvek and Dan Bewley, people love them because they're willing to get out there and get among it. And, it doesn't matter sometimes if you're not racking all the points up. If they can see the effort, then that's what gets fans off the seats as well, isn't it?
Too right. And you're right to point out, Antti. He had a great week. And there's no doubt that he was, one of the reasons why they were knocking on the door. No Timo Lahti this year, who was instrumental of leading them into the final in 2022. Don't know what's gone on there because Timo Lahti now represents Sweden, which is slightly bizarre. But and they could have done
change of heart.
Yeah, exactly. But no, Timo Lahti, that's why Chris Harris still remains so very popular, because he gets out there and he has a go. He never throws the towel in, and certainly those guys epitomise that. They didn't quite manage to do it. Germany with Norbert Bladorn, with Kai Hülkenberg in sparkling form actually. They were strong enough to see themselves through. So, Poland probably sort of not quite at their best. The world champion having a heavy fall. They went through. Sweden looking pretty good with Torssell. Actually, Torssell had a nasty crash in the week, but fair play to him. He managed to keep himself up and going. But no, it was a good opening round despite the weather trying to intervene.
The second semi-final, of course, you had a couple of big hitters in there in Denmark and Australia, and Denmark actually won the day. Australia coming in second place, and then it was that battle for who would make the third qualification position. And the Czech Republic had been going along pretty well. They'd been racking the points up with Václav Milik and Jan Kvek, but it was Latvia in the end who bagged the spot with a bit of a mistake in that race off for the Czech Republic. Saw Latvia through, and maybe that was one of the surprises of the week actually. Yes,
it was at that stage certainly. As you know, you rightly point out, with the difference in point scoring with 4-3-2-0, the Czechs were in second and third. They didn't actually have to do any more than that. They were actually relatively comfortable there. Lebedev's was leading away, but Kvek was sort of like had got the bit between his teeth and was closing in on Lebedev's, and then just with the conditions heavy on the outside, got too much grip, and I think his natural enthusiasm just got the better of him. That's how it appeared. Very hard on him, but it was a parlour error, and effectively he gifted Latvia a final slot, because the Czechs should have gone through. But you know, these things happen with that point scoring. We actually saw it in the very first time it was run when Ty Woofenden was out front and just went for the win, and Robert Lambert was stuck behind. So you know, it maybe he just forgot. You know, it's the only time that they actually raced with that point scoring system, and I guess you've got to be aware and thinking clearly. But hey, Czech Republic's loss was the Latvians' gain, and they were more than delighted to qualify. So a bit of a shock there. But Sweden looked, Denmark in that particular meeting were outstanding. They were outstanding. You know, the management team with Nicky Pedersen and Hans Andersen rotating their squad. They could do no wrong in the semi-final, and their boys looked like superstars. And they only dropped a couple of points. They scored 40 points. They only dropped 2. To Australia. Obviously, Jack Holder did something similar to what Jan Kvek did. He dropped it. But in the end, you know, Denmark and Australia expected to go through. They duly did. And Latvia coming through as a bit of a surprise package. But another really good meeting. Like Heat 3, even though it was wet, I remember Mickelson making a great big long dash down the inside. And again, the racing was of good quality throughout the night.
Yeah, they did do some impressive work to scoop all that slop off as well. I think that the rain had come down, as you say, especially on that Wednesday. And there are some videos online from some of the track staff of just showing how much stuff they took off. And they took loads and loads of this heavy, sloppy shale off the top of it. But underneath, it was all fine. It was compact and hard. And that's one of the things about Manchester. What makes it is, first of all, I think the material that they use. They use a certain type of material. They're under no illusions that they built a speedway track in Manchester, and it's not known for its tropical weather, but also great drainage as well. So you don't get a situation where, say, for example, like maybe Sheffield, where you might get it underwater and it's like a boating lake and you're never going to dry it out. So, you know, I know that Phil Morris has said as well that if there is a track where you can race a little bit in the wet, then Manchester is it. Did have some good racing. It was interesting to see the USA. They brought over a decent side. I saw Steve Evans at Birmingham the night before the first evening, and I know they were all sort of excited to get involved in this. It was a hard evening for them. They got 20 points. They tied with Slovenia. They finished 6th, but I think for them the overall trip has been worthwhile, and a few of the Americans rode in the Ben Fund meeting at Workington on Sunday as well, where they got, Gino Manzari's had a great performance there, actually, and they've got this experience under their belt of top-level competition, which perhaps for riders other than Luke Becker for the American team as such? Is that an experience that's been sort of hard to come by? That real competitive world class level and riding against some of the best in the world like Denmark or Australia.
Yeah, I think you've got a very good positive spin on that for America. I understand what you've said about it, but I'm a little bit more. I don't want to be too downbeat about America, but Brock Nickel and Gino Manzarek aren't new riders. They've been around a while. Gino Manzarek is a rider that was here probably 10 years ago riding for Ipswich. And in truth, Gino Manzarek is a good, solid, probably league rider, but is he an international rider? I would argue no. Brock Nickel is semi-retired, having spent a number of years here and has gone home. Luke Becker looked super. Luke Becker rode out of his skin. He won some races and beat some big names at the National Speedway Stadium, and he looked like genuine top class. I think America's problem is they've got to find another one. They need to find and generate the interest to get some pucker, new, young talent coming through. And then maybe they will be a force to be reckoned with. Right now, they just haven't got enough riders. And enough riders that are full-time, Ian. They've just not got it, We've had the Rummels in previous years. Brock Nickel made a real good go of it a few years ago, but effectively now has gone back to America and it just rides as it's a hobby, really, Speedway for him now. So yeah, America have got work to do, but as I say, the one shining light for me was the form of Luke Becker, who hasn't had a great season for the Leicester Lions, but they're on a big stage. I've got to say he rode really well. What the future holds for America, I think it's a long road back. They've got to generate the interest at home to encourage people to learn or want to ride Speedway again. The days of the 80s and 90s and Billy and Greg are gone. And there isn't a lot coming through. So it would be lovely to see. But nonetheless, I'm looking at results here as you just reeled off. Norway, obviously, a minor nation. They found it tough. Slovenia, none of these nations were going to get to the final. But as you say, being in a Speedway of Nations semi-final, those guys go home hopefully a bit richer for the experience.
For Norway, obviously, Matthias Polstad gave it his all. He's one of the strong upcoming riders who's racing in the continent. It's interesting that they left out Lasse Fredriksson, who has been riding in the British leagues. He rides for Edinburgh, and he's a decent rider on a British track. And to bring in some sort of unknown names, you would think that maybe having a British-based rider that might come with a level of support as well. You get the Edinburgh fans involved. It was interesting that they overlooked him, considering that he's, I think, the only Norwegian rider racing in Britain right now. It was sort of an interesting call, but there we go.
Well, it's a call that you can't really understand. It seems that maybe politics has involved the only way you would know whether the rider wanted to do it. Was he asked or was he invited and he turned it down? These things you don't know. It's like the French situation. I didn't understand. Laurent Sambaret just didn't use his third rider when the other rider was clearly never going to score a point. Again, inexplicable. And sort of it leaves you with you sort of scratching your head a little bit. But, Matthias Polstad, here with him, he's got a future. He's got a future. If he keeps progressing, he looks like he could become, the real deal, and that would be great. Rune Holter was there, and that was quite funny actually seeing Rune Holter on the sidelines actually supporting and working with the Norwegians because about a decade ago or a bit more, actually he defected to become a Pole and actually won the World Cup as a Polish rider, which when you look back now, you would never have dreamt that the Poles would need to hire in a rider from another country because they're blessed with so many now. But no, we had a good chat with him, and he was saying that it is difficult because they've only really got 2 tracks running, and it's difficult to generate the interest. But no, semi-final number 2, as I say, more rain, track conditions tricky, but the track behaved impeccably, and apart from the Czechs kind of blowing it. Latvia joining Australia and Denmark in particular looking so strong. All of a sudden we were set for the final.
Yeah, so that final then was contested on Saturday night, and it was between Sweden, Germany, Poland, Denmark, Latvia, Australia and Great Britain. I don't want to throw any spoilers in there. Surely by now you know what the result was. But of course, and if you don't want to know what the result was, then obviously you need to switch off now. But it was, I think everybody will know. When we were talking to people, I know we were trying to do a preview podcast. I ended up managing to put a preview podcast together with Rory Schlein, in fact, and he's able to speak for both Australia and Great Britain the way his career's gone. We all sort of said that probably it would be Poland, Australia, and Great Britain. Come the top three, that would be the podium that we were choosing, and that's the only thing we got wrong, really, that Poland actually had a worse evening than they probably would have imagined, because finishing fifth. We'll talk about the grand final in a moment, but first of all, get to Poland, because all the eyes were on them. It's going to be their year. This year, nobody's going to stop Bartosz Szmartlik. They're going to come over here and they're going to do it and show what they're made of. But it all went wrong, didn't it? It all went wrong. And for the first time, for a while, for me anyway, that we saw Szmartlik come unstuck, really, and start to lose his cool and throw his teddies out of the cot with Phil Morris a little bit when over that tapes exclusion. And, it just shows that he is human after all.
Yeah, I don't think he was right. I get what you're saying, and when you look at it on the face of it, yes, he was a bit erratic. He wasn't quite the cool, calm, collected world champion that we've become accustomed to seeing. I agree with that 100%. But I think it reflects to what happened earlier in the week. I don't think he was right. I think when you looked at him in the pits after that crash earlier in the week, he wasn't really with it. And I think that that may have been one of the reasons why he wasn't quite as good on Saturday as he might have been. In truth, it's interesting that the conversations you were having leading up to the weekend, you had Poland in the top three, or Poland as favourites. Interesting talking to my version of results, Chris's, talking to Tony Briggs, talking to lots of people. Actually, none of us had Poland in the top three. None of us. I certainly didn't.
Really?
No, because they don't like it. They don't like the Speedway of Nations. They never have. And I think one of the reasons that they haven't won it is because, look at the way they came back into the Speedway World Cup last year. They finished sixth in the Speedway of Nations in Voyance, where they were dreadful. They just don't like it, and they don't get enthusiastic about it. And then they win in Wrocław in dramatic fashion in the last heat. And then in the Speedway World Cup, Speedway of Nations, admittedly, I sensed that they wanted to do it. Kubera certainly was very keen. But again, even if they were really keen to do it, things conspired against them. The crash with Szmartlik, they used, and I didn't get the fact that they used Janowski in the qualifying, in the semi-final, but they were never going to use him in the final. That decision had been made. But with that, if you've made that decision and you've got Dudek there, well, surely you would want to give him a run at the National Speedway Stadium. Surely give him some track time, because the semi-final, if you're going well, is the opportunity to switch your riders around. We saw that with several of the teams. So I didn't get that from Dubrutsky. I didn't get that at all. I thought that was a mistake by him, because I know that he had a great weekend the weekend before in the Extra Liga or whatever it was. But it's very different from riding in the UK when it's raining and it's a bit different. So I just think that they weren't as composed and together as they have been in previous Speedway World Cups in particular. And my feeling is that Szmartlik's a really genuine sort of kid. I don't think he throws the towel in. He's a genuine racer. I think he tried as best he could on Saturday night. But I think that when you've had a bit of concussion, you might think you're all right, but it's funny, you might get a week later after the event and you wake up in the morning and you suddenly realise, you think, Christ, actually, I don't think I have been, because today I feel a different bloke. And because I've experienced that, Ian, it's funny, you think you're perfectly okay, but actually there's like a little bit of a cloud hanging over you. But he obviously didn't want to pull him out, did he? He didn't use Dudek, and so it didn't go right for Poland. And again, they've had another disappointing Speedway of Nations.
Reading some of the comments online from Polish fans, I think, like you said, really, that maybe they think that he should have pulled Smarslik out, and the fact that that his name has gone before him, really, and it's like, well, he's in there come what may, and if Bartek says he's fit to ride, he's fit to ride. But I think there are a few people who would have preferred to have seen Janowski and Kubera maybe in the side and leave Smarslik out. Brave decision, but maybe actually the fact that he got, and we've talked about this not on this podcast because we're going to do this preview, which we never had. We had to go to the dentist, Kelv. He had to sit on the sidelines.
I mean, that was a week from hell. A week from hell. We need a podcast on my dentistry just on its own. We have to get to it.
Okay. Well, let's do that. But the whole choice of the and but I did mention this to Rory Schlein when we're doing that one, that your thoughts on the team selection, perhaps that Dubrucki sticking with the names he knew, and actually some Polish fans saying that, well, maybe there's a case for bringing Jarek Hampel back. Janusz Kolodze is among the top riders in Extraliga right now. He's right up there. He's got an average, he's doing very well. So on form, the riders, whilst yes, they may have been there, seen it and done it, the form at this moment in time, there are better Polish riders around that if you're going on that present form of this season, that they've been totally overlooked. And that's not including Wozniak as well.
Yeah, I get that, and they put a lot of store in the performances in the Extraliga because they believe, and possibly rightly so, that it is the most competitive league in the world. But entirely different conditions than you encounter in the UK. Kolodze, no chance, no way would I have had him at the National Speedway Stadium. The conditions that they encountered, I don't think would have suited him at all. I think Maciej Janowski, I understand completely why he was there. He's riding in the UK. He's not going great, but he's not going terrible. I think Dudek, I'm not sure. Pawlicki was in the squad. Jarek Hampel, I'm sorry, that boat sailed. From my point of view, no chance. 10 years ago, maybe, but not now. I think they came with a team that could win. I think they could have managed it slightly differently, and maybe they would have got a different result. You cannot legislate for that accident in the semi-final to your best rider. You just can't legislate from it. Mm. And I think it was a little bit like Gareth Southgate with Harry Kane. I think there's the player or the rider's just got too much credit with the manager, and his profile is so strong they just can't step him down. And I think that was the case with Bartosz Smarslik. And he declared himself fit. He flew back. He went back to Poland. He flew back in, obviously feeling... He wouldn't have flown back if he didn't think he could do the job, would he? So... But again, we can go on and on about all the different scenarios around Poland. Fact of the matter is, since 2018, and they haven't done it. They haven't won it. Mm. And that is remarkable in itself. When you consider last year in 2023, they won every gold medal available. They won all of it. And they go to the Speedway of Nations, and for whatever reason, they just don't find it. It was the Russians to begin with that kicked everybody's backsides. Then we win. I mean, then Australia did the business in Denmark a couple of years ago. So, but hey, they'll just have to lick their wounds, and they'll... Mate, you can't feel too sorry for them because they're going to win another World Championship with Smarslik anyway. All things being equal, by the time he gets to Cardiff in a few weeks' time, he'll be all refreshed and raring to go again.
Yeah, that's one to watch. Certainly, that is the next fixture on the calendar. But for the Speedway of Nations, then another fantastic evening for Great Britain, who did it once again, and that means now that they've finished in the world's top two for the last 4 seasons in the various competitions, and be that the Speedway of Nations or the Speedway World Cup last year, and of course finishing on the top step of the podium twice in that time as well. And same guys as well, and similar in some respects, finding Ty Wolfenden once again sidelined through injury, and it was all down to Robert Lambert and Dan Bewley, who were the two riders who rode every heat through the course of the event. Tom Brennan, the third rider, but he didn't ride, but we saw him making his contribution in the pits. Also, Leon Flint was in the pits as well, many others involved in the back room. But not an ideal start for Dan Bewley. Took him a couple of rides to sort things out, to come down to the second bike. But once he got on that second bike, there was no looking back.
No, and it's an interesting point you make about the fact that Ty Woofenden was injured. And, dreadful timing for Ty again, unfortunately. And, and his involvement with the Team Great Britain has been interrupted by injury on a regular basis. When it was a 2-day event at Manchester, of course, he had that horrifying crash on the first day and then missed the second day. And we went on to win. And now coming into it, because if Ty had been there, even though his form hasn't been great, he rode well in the British final. He's riding very well for Sheffield. Dan Bewley hasn't scored a point in his first 2 rides. If you're Olly Allen and Simon Stead, are you thinking, we better give a 3-time world champion a run now? And all of a sudden, that might have actually created a scenario within the team that if then it hadn't have clicked with Woofenden, then that race, the third race, would have slipped away, possibly wouldn't have been world champions. But they obviously trusted Bewley. Brennan less experienced. They stuck with the same pair, and Bewley made up for it fabulously, didn't he? Came out in that third race. In fact, terrific turn back, probably the turn back of the evening, and he looked a completely different rider. So, and from then on, they clicked. I mean, Robert Lambert was just outstanding. I mean, he got a lot of criticism for his poor performance from the British final. Didn't even make the race off, did he? Didn't even make the last chance qualifier. And he would have been really upset about that, with the big 3 there, all the 3 Grand Prix riders, and Bewley and Woofenden going head to head, and he missed out. But by golly, he made up for it on Saturday night. So, yeah, it was. I was proud of it. I'm lucky enough to have done that. I won the World Team Cup back in the black and white days at Bradford. I was actually captain that day, so it means a lot. And for those involved to have had 2 golds and 2 silvers in the last 4 years, I mean, it's a really impressive run. Really impressive.
I think as well, and a lot of riders say this, and I'm not sure if you were a Bradford rider at the time that you won that at Bradford, but it can be hard. I know Gary Havelock spoke about it, that whenever he raced on his home track, whenever there was a big event at Bradford, he always found the pressure a lot harder, racing sort of on his home circuit. And I know some riders have said that. So for Dan Bewley to come out at Bellevue with the expectation of, he's the track record holder around here, he's very rarely beaten, to come out and find himself 2 rides down and with not a lot to show for it, in a big event, all eyes are on him. He's going to be feeling the pressure there to come out then and perform. But and obviously it's not all in your hands if your bike's not able to get you to the speed you need to be going at.
No, and it's a very good point you make, because and Gary Havelock would have experienced it. I experienced it with the British final being held at Brandon every year, riding for Coventry. No Coventry rider had won it, and you're just, because you ride there, there's this sort of expectation that it will be easier for you. But in truth, it isn't. The track is often different from what you experience on a weekly basis for your league match. You've got riders that are upping their game. They're coming and they're prepared to ride and dig deep. And all those factors come into it. And Bewley is a remarkable man because he's won a hat-trick of British Championships in front of his home crowd now. And particularly this year, I think that was extra special, being able to do it with Ty Woofenden and Robert Lambert in the field as well. And then for him to turn that around on Saturday night when, alarm bells were beginning to ring, really, because last places with that scoring system were a no-no, and we'd had 2 after the first 2 races. They then clicked into gear, and then they were the most impressive team. So I think for Dan Bewley, I think it shows a mental strength and a resolve that champions have. And it's not, you don't see it very often, Ian, you know what I mean? So fair play to him, and that was pretty special.
And then coming down to that final, of course, it was Britain versus Australia. If I did predict one thing, I said it would be really good to see a grand final with Dan Bewley and Brady Kurtz going at it. That would give the Bellevue fans something to think about. And that's exactly what happened there at the end with, I mean, we were talking about cutbacks, but that overtake from Bewley to go from last and then come steaming up the inside and take the two of them effectively to get into second place in behind Robert Lambert in that final. I mean, that was a move and a half, but one that was required at that moment because that second beginning of that move that Australia were heading for victory.
Yeah, it was a classic conclusion to the meeting because it was so topsy-turvy in the first couple of laps. And Jack Holder was doing everything he possibly could to keep Kurtz alongside him because second and third would have done, and they would have been world champions and they would have retained the title. But Bewley, I think Holder just slowed it down a fraction. Kurtz was then obviously slightly vulnerable, and Bewley read it fabulously well and made that move. And then literally Robert Lambert and him just put their heads down and rode as like their lives depended on it, and clinched the deal and won the day in which was a grandstand finish. Australia actually were my favourites going into the event. I thought with Frick, Holder and Kurtz, I thought they might just have enough. I thought the three of them together would give Mark Lemon, if one of them was slightly off, that third rider, because I'd seen Frick ride there 2 weeks ago for the Leicester Lions, and he had a couple of races with Bewley that were outstanding. I mean, and although Mark actually made light of the decision to go with Kurtz before the event, he sort of made light of that. I still think that was quite a brave call for him because, the pair that had won the World Championship in 22 was Frick and Holder. Kurtz isn't a Grand Prix rider, hasn't made that breakthrough yet. Admittedly, he does ride Bellevue very well, but still, it was a brave one and really and truthfully the right one because Kurtz worked really hard in the early heats to make sure he got those third places. He really did work. He had quite often the worst gate, and he really showed a lot of commitment. When he passed Schmarzlik round the outside, I mean, that's possibly the pass of the week. I mean, Schmarzlik don't give you a lot of racing room, and he isn't hanging about. And he literally rode up the bloody safety fence to go round the outside of him. Yeah. And I think even Mr. Schmarzlik had to tip his hat as he went by. He said, fair play, you want it that much, then you can have that. But no, a great finish. And I think a lot of respect between the two teams, but obviously in front of your home crowd, to do it again there, I think it was brilliant. It was absolutely sensational finish to the night.
For Brady Kurtz, he's in the Grand Prix Challenge, actually, at Pardubice at the end of the season. Do you know, the way he's riding there, when you see him going round the long way around part of Schmarzlik, you think, well, there's no reason why, he couldn't potentially mix it when it comes to that event to decide next year's Grand Prix riders, because there's a lot more emphasis on that race-off now rather than wildcards, I think, for 2025, isn't there?
It does, I'm hearing so, yes. And Brady Kurtz is on the verge of becoming a fully fledged Grand Prix rider, and I think he would warrant it. I think he's one of those nearly guys. He's always been sort of just under the radar. It's been Frick, Doyle and Holder for the recent seasons, and Kurtz has always been slightly in the background. When I think of Jason Doyle's career, he was a bit of a guy in a similar position where it was Ryan Sullivan, it was Lee Adams, it was Jason Crump, those guys, and Doyle was sort of the one that was overlooked. And then Doyle managed to get that breakthrough, and then all of a sudden he kicked on and has had a fabulous career. Maybe Kurtz will do something similar, but he'd have to do it everywhere, of course. He can't just do it at home because not every meeting's held at Bellevue. But part of it's a big, wide track. He's a rider that's got quite a lot of experience now. Wouldn't be a total shock to me if he was able to qualify.
Mentioned for Germany, of course, Sweden finished third with Freddie Lindgren and Jakob Torsell. Germany missing out just by the 1 point. It was 27 points to Sweden, 26 to Germany. So very close to getting on the podium there, which is a good effort considering also with Poland and Denmark in that lineup as well. Not an easy task to finish fourth, and almost very nearly just bar that 1 point, finishing joint third or maybe even better. You never know.
Well, to be honest, they were the surprise package of the final because they were leading it after a couple of races. They got off to a fantastic start. Heat 1, boom, 7 points. Thank you very much indeed. What a way to start. And Norit Bladorn had a couple of rides that were really fantastic. And Kai Hülkenberg was super quick all week. In the semi he was great, and again in the final. They just ran out of steam. They just faded in the latter races, which was unfortunate because they could easily have picked up a medal, which would have been, well, I don't think anybody would have predicted Germany being in the top 3. And they were within a whisker of doing it. And so fair play to them. And I think, it was a successful German Grand Prix in Lambert. It was a good crowd and a great meeting. Kai Hülkenberg is going well. Let's hope he can continue to go well in the second half of the GP season. But that was a really encouraging performance by them. And they'll be spurred on by that. I think Sweden overall, they had a pretty good week. The Speedway of Nations 2, they got a medal, and they got another bronze medal in the senior event on Saturday night as well. I thought that Torsell and Lindgren obviously coming good in the last few weeks. They led from the front, but both guys had pretty heavy crashes during the week. I mean, Torsell got hit by a rider, I think it was Melanchuk from the Ukraine. I mean, Christ, he just wiped him out coming out of turn 4. And he was lucky to get up with that, but I thought they had a pretty good week. But Germany, yeah, fair play to them. That was exciting to see them pushing so hard.
So, congratulations to Great Britain, then champions of the world in the Speedway of Nations, with Robert Lambert and Dan Bewley and Tom Brennan, of course, all getting their gold medals. Tom Brennan said that he sort of felt a little bit like a competition winner in some respects because he'd had the sort of a night where he'd not actually been out on the track, but he, the work goes on. In the pits and supporting the other guys. It was a real team effort. We saw Leon Flint in the pits, as I mentioned earlier. There was plenty others all involved. Ashley Holloway was in there as well with Simon Stead and Olly Allen providing technical support. So it's obviously the riders are the ones out there on the track getting the points and doing the work, but there's more to it, isn't there, Kelv? It is a real team effort away from the track in the pits, and that work is important certainly when the pressure's on, like it probably was after those first 2 rides for Dan Bewley.
Certainly, yeah, and I think that encouragement and just from a peace of mind, you can start getting a bit nervous. You might feel a bit, on the back foot. Crikey, it's not going as well, and then decisions have to be made, and then having good people around you that are being able to be a bit calmer and think straight. Well, let's try the other bike, Dan. Let's jump on the other one. Maybe that was a decision that was helped with Ashley Holloway there. But just generally that camaraderie in the pits, it just makes you feel a little bit of protection from the intensity of the evening. And it's a team that's been together for a while now. Rob Painter has been at the helm of Team Great Britain for, I think it must be, 4 or 5 years now, maybe? And under that period of time, he's been blessed with some world-class riders. But there's no doubt that it's nice to see that there's a real enthusiasm around the group, and it tends to bring out the best. I don't think I've seen, Robert Lambert, he hasn't managed to win a Grand Prix, but that was a very professional, grown-up, world-class performance. I think did he get beaten? I think he might have got beaten once by an opponent on Saturday night. And when you look at the lineup, that was pretty special to have that composure every time out. They did 8 heats, Ian. You can't get lucky 8 times, mate, on the same night. They came through that race off. It was absolutely reverse, wasn't it, of what happened with them in Voyens, where they went straight through. Australia went straight through this time. They came through the race off and then nailed it in the final. Fantastic. Really pleased for them.
Yeah, I'm just looking now. Robert Lambert, he finished second behind Dan Bewley in Heat 8.
An opposing rider, isn't it?
I'm just looking. Yeah. No, he won heat
I think
17.
Australia, I think it was a 5-4. Was it 5-4 against Australia or Poland? I can't remember.
No, the qualifier. No, Sweden. Freddie Lindgren beat him. That's all.
Okay.
The only other points, yeah, that was the only point he dropped to an opponent was to Freddie Lindgren in the final qualifier where they got the 5-4 with Jakob Torsell finished fourth. So, yeah,
That's pretty impressive.
And any other points
over 8 races. I mean, that was an outstanding performance. One that I think he will be rightly very proud of. And then, obviously Dan did get the outside gates most of the time. If I'm right, I think he got the outside gate all the time. So he had to do strut his stuff around the outside, and he managed to join him up the front in the latter races. So the combination worked really well. They worked well together, obviously, even though there must be a sense of rivalry when it comes to the GPs. But fair play, they've done it, and unarguably they were dominant at the end there.
And for Speedway of Nations 2, just a quick mention for that on Friday, as you mentioned, not in ideal weather conditions. Great Britain started well with Leon Flint and Dan Thompson. Dan Thompson, though, crashed out, didn't he? And that really sent Britain's hopes flying there. They missed out, there's only 6 points in it between Britain, who finished on 35. Poland won the event on 41 points, but Leon Flint and Dan Thompson were flying at that point. Sam Hagan came in, had a bit of a more difficult time at that point, but maybe just that crash there really just derailing Britain's chances at that point.
Well, it was a marathon night, 28 races, because there were 8 teams. Great Britain obviously didn't qualify for the Speedway of Nations 2 because they were 7th. They just dropped out of the rankings. Or the qualifying spots when they raced in Riga last year. But they're back in, 3 new riders. Leon Flint, it's the best I've seen him ride. He's a bit up and down whenever I've seen him ride. He doesn't always have a great night, but fair play to Leon. He rode out of his skin. Dan Thompson was doing a great supporting role at that stage, but clipped that rut on the inside, dislocated his shoulder. So unfortunate. I think if Dan Thompson hadn't have done that, they would have got a medal for sure. Definitely. Whether they would have beaten Poland, we'll never know. But the fact of the matter is they would have been on the rostrum. Sam Hagan, brilliant experience for Sam, who's having a good season. But that's a big step up for him. Australia, again, Keenan Rue looked really good, but James Pearson wasn't quite able to support him on a regular basis. And Sweden, well... Philip Hellstrom-Bangs, mate. I don't know if I was a promoter, I'd be torn because he definitely would put bums on seats. There's no doubt about that. He'll put bums on seats, but the problem is how long would it last? That's the problem. It might only last a month, and then he's out for a while because he's a wild child. I mean, he properly does get involved in all sorts of capers out there. But he was a very eye-catching rider, and I think he was a bit frustrated. He got excluded, didn't he? When that Polish lad, he ran wide, and to be honest, I thought he was hard done by there. I thought that was some controversy where, what is it? Is it Sebastian Bamba or Bartosz Bamba? Bartosz Bamba. Bartosz Bamba. He ran wide coming out of turn 4. Hellstrom-Bangs dived up the inside, and they just touched, and he went down, and I thought maybe that went the wrong way for him, but and that could have been a different story then. Maybe Sweden could have kicked on and won gold, but Poland winning again. I mean, they've won 17 gold medals at under 21 level. It's getting boring. It's getting really boring, but fair play. It's an extraordinary record.
There's going to be no stopping that. I did an interview with Neil Vatcher before the SON2 a week or two ago, and he was saying he'd been over in Poland couple of weeks back, and they had 90 entries for their youth championships in Poland. So there's no shortage of riders coming through the system there. It's frightening, just the volume that they've got of interest of riders at a young age, 16 or under, that are taking the sport up. It is a totally different level, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we saw that with the SGP winner, wasn't it? Is it Maximilian Pawlczak, winning with a maximum? I mean, spoke beautiful English, rode like an experienced campaigner. And as you've just pointed out, they seem to have, I think also economically, they can earn good money right from the get-go. If they get picked up by clubs, and it's a career, it's a proper career for them. So it's attracting lots of young riders. I think the society's different attitude to Speedway. There's still a lot of enthusiasm. I think in Scandinavia and other parts of the world, I think dangerous motorcycle sports, I think parents are a little bit more reluctant to actually allow their kids to get involved. This no brakes, no fear business literally fills parents with fear and say, well, look, young Jimmy's not doing that. He's going to go and play football. But right now, I don't see an easy answer to those issues. But Poland, in the end came through very well. So congratulations to them. But it didn't spur their senior team on. It didn't quite manage to do it. And I suppose that the under-21s have got the bragging rights going home. Mate, when are you going to get a medal, boys?
Yeah, winning's not for everyone, Bartek.
There
was a high point, actually, this week. Will Cairns, turned 15. And he's been, well, obviously you've seen him in the SGP3, British 250cc champion, and obviously one of the big rising stars of British Speedway. And real talent for us all to be excited about in time if everything continues. Working with Greg Hancock, and he's got a lot of support and working very, very hard as well for it. It's not like he's been gifted much. He's got obviously a lot of support and a lot of help, and fortunate in that way. But he made his debut in the National League. He's 15, so he's allowed to ride in the National League. He can't ride in the Championship or the Premiership yet until next season, so give it a year and there'll be promoters lining up. So he made his debut as a guest for Sheffield/Scunthorpe, the National League team. They were racing at Oxford, and on his debut, William Cairns, on his first 500cc meeting, scored 19. It's not a bad start.
Reasonable start, yeah. Yeah, got off to a bit of a flyer there. Let's hope that he can manage to maintain those standards. Have I seen that he signed for Bellevue for 2 seasons?
Yes, he has. He's for the National League. Yes, Bellevue Colts. So that's been announced today. Yeah, so he will be riding.
Yeah, young William Cairns has clearly got a future. Surprising that his father owns Leicester Lions, if I'm right in thinking. But
yes,
hasn't signed for the Leicester Lions. Wants to make his own way. But he'll end up going there at some point, I'm sure. I'm racing around there. But no, William Cairns is clearly a rider that has ability, and importantly has a good support package behind him. He's going to have good kit, and if the kid's got it in him and stays focused, then he's going to be somebody to keep an eye out for the future. So 16, 17, in the next 2 or 3 years, well, the world's his oyster in lots of ways.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think I remember speaking to his dad, Paul, as you say, is the owner of Leicester. I was saying, so is he going to be riding for the Cubs then? And he said, no, he's not going to be riding for me. He's made it clear, and this was it, I think, in April. He's made it clear he's not going to be riding here. He's going to be, heading to, I think, well, Bellevue was he had the pick of wherever he wanted to go, I think. But yeah, he's gone to Bellevue, and I think as well. Obviously, it's Bellevue, isn't it? But it's the kind of track as well to get him used to the sort of stuff he might face on the continent too. He's used to Leicester. He's ridden around Leicester a lot, tight tracks and what have you. He's nailed that. So I think the bigger tracks are something that he wants to get used to as well. So interesting to see how he goes in the National League for the rest of the season. Quick word about Cardiff then while we're on, because that'll be the next thing. It's not for a while yet, but that is the next Grand Prix on the calendar, believe it or not, in about 4 weeks from now. And heading to the Principality Stadium with, obviously Schmarschlick with a healthy lead heading into that event, you could to say the least. But of course, everybody's looking for a British winner. We now know who the wild card's going to be. That's going to be Tom Brennan. He'll be representing, along with obviously Bewley and Robert Lambert and potentially Ty Woofenden. He hasn't ruled it out yet, but it would be probably quite a comeback to make it in time for then. But yeah, obviously one of the few events where you don't have to worry about the weather, at least there, Kelv.
No, thank God for that. And the summer we're having, I think that the promoters and the organisers will be delighted that we have a roof there as well. Cardiff is always a meeting you look forward to. It's been on the calendar since 2001, I think. And we've, it would be fabulous. Bewley won it a couple of seasons ago. We've only had a couple of British winners, with Harris back in the O's in 07. Bewley, of course, winning it, which was like a dream come true, really. It was quite extraordinary. We had Martin Vashalik winning it last year. Can anybody get back to Smarslick? Don't think so. I would suggest, all things being equal, that he will cruise to his 5th World Championship. Now it's all about, who else can make a mark in the World Championship? Will Freddie Lindgren rediscover it and keep this form going? Fantastic win in Gorjov. He would love to do it. He rides in the UK now. He would love to win in Cardiff. I'm sure that there will be a lot of interest, renewed enthusiasm for the World Championship off the back of winning the Speedway of Nations. I've got to believe that. The win in Bellevue could do ticket sales a whole load of good going into the Principality. I've got to believe that. We will have 2-3 riders that will be very popular: Lambert, Bewley, and Brennan. If Woofenden's able to make it, that would be an added bonus. You wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me completely. It wouldn't shock me if Woofenden turned up, because he does have remarkable powers of recovery, but it is a nasty break to his elbow. It is very nasty. But I'd encourage everybody to go, because, as I say, there's got to be some good feel factor after winning in Manchester last weekend. And let's make Cardiff big time again. Since COVID, it hasn't been quite at the same level as previously. I'd love to see a huge crowd in there, and get right behind the Brits and let's make it very special. Because when it's like that, it's a fantastic venue. It really is. It's special, and that stadium, that Principality Stadium, it's cosy, isn't it? You're near it. You're not all spread out. I know Warsaw gets loads of people, and everybody says it's the best, it's the greatest speedway meeting or the biggest speedway meeting, but it doesn't quite have the same atmosphere that the Principality has when you get 40,000 in there. It doesn't, and I'd love to see that again.
Cardiff's deceptive as well, and people go, look at how many empty seats there are, but it's very rare that the Principality Stadium gets fully sold out for anything apart from like the Six Nations rugby. That it is such a cavernous stadium. People don't take into account that it's one of the biggest stadiums in Europe. It's certainly the biggest covered stadium in Europe.
Right.
Maybe I don't know, that you've got the Bernabeu now in Madrid might have just overtaken it. I'm not sure, but it is a massive stadium. 78,000 people or whatever it can fit in there. It's cavernous, and you're gonna have to go 50, 60,000 even with the bottom tier shut for it to look full, because it's just so big. That said, we hear stories now, and obviously we heard Lemo making a pitch before for a Grand Prix to go to the National Speedway Stadium, but this is, I think, the last year of the contract, isn't it? Presently, with as far as Cardiff goes, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future. So, it is one of those where we don't know what the future holds. And if you ever want to go to Cardiff, then make sure you go.
Yes, well, there is that, and I'd like to think that people will go back. It's not a cheap weekend. I think that has been a lot of gripe for a lot of people. Hotel tariffs go through the roof. I think as a consequence, that's why it's a slightly earlier start. You do now get the added sprint race on Friday if you wanted to be involved with that. If you've got a ticket and you buy a program, you can go and watch that. That's a little bit of added action on Friday afternoon. And as I say, I think we've just won the Speedway of Nations World Championship. And I think I don't care about all the PR in the world. That one moment on Saturday night has got to be capitalised on to sell British Speedway and try and get as many people back in the Principality as we possibly can. Just make it what it was, because, look, people can say differently, but it isn't. We haven't had the attendance in the last couple of years that we previously had. We just simply haven't. And to get the sort of attendance that we had previously would be fabulous, or even if we make some way towards it, because it can be a very special event when it's that atmosphere in there. You're right, it's a huge place. It's a huge place, but when you get 40,000 in there, I tell you what, mate, you can't hear yourself think. You just can't hear yourself think. And our fans, with all the air horns and flags, I mean, the atmosphere in there with the roof shut is extraordinary. So, yeah, fair play. Looking forward to it.
There's been a lot said about ticket prices for the Speedway of Nations. I'm just looking now for the Grand Prix, and to go to Cardiff, the cheapest ticket is 20 quid for an adult ticket. So there you go. I think that's, pretty reasonable. Probably cheaper than most Premiership clubs, actually, if you're going to walk up on the gate. So 20 quid the cheapest if you want to sit up the top, and that is a decent view as well, to be honest. So you're not going to lose out and get in there and be part of the event.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point you make there, the fact that there isn't a bad seat in the house there. Yes, you're a little bit further away, granted, but the way that stadium is designed, you've got a good view all the way round. You haven't got an old stanchion where you have to literally break your neck to look round it, or you haven't got, to me, it is well designed. So, £20, admittedly you've got to get there, but £20 for a ticket is value. And as I say, I don't care if the top tier's full and people just take advantage of that. I think get along. We don't know what the future holds for Cardiff. And I think people would regret not going if it were to disappear off the calendar. But as I say, let's hope that's not the case. But off the back of the win last weekend, I think one or two people will be excited to go again.
Yeah, that's it. Make it a date. I think crowds have gone up gradually since the pandemic and what have you, but maybe this year will be better yet. So make your plans. You know you're not going to run out of space there. That's the other thing. You can leave it to the last minute. You will get a ticket on the day. It is not going to sell out because there are so many seats. But 20 quid, and you can be part of it. And part of the day as well, the fan zone, knocking around town, bumping into other Speedway fans. No doubt you will see some of the riders, maybe yourself, Kelvin, who knows, knocking around the streets. You get photographs and bump into these people, not necessarily riders involved in the Grand Prix, but it's like a festival of Speedway. There's riders from your team, riders from years ago that you've maybe not seen for ages. Everybody turns up. It's just a bit of a festival of Speedway and getting together and talking about the sport in the town as well, isn't it?
It is, yes, and you can have some interesting conversations, particularly afterwards when we come off air and people have enjoyed a drink or two. When you're stone cold, you're stone cold sober, and there's one or two people that are a little bit worse for wear. Those conversations are quite interesting. But no, it's a real social town, and with the way it works there, with the stadium right in the city. It works nicely. Everywhere's within walking distance of it, and generally people, as you say, it's an opportunity to catch up with people sometimes that you haven't seen for years because they make that pilgrimage back to Cardiff. So I think it's well worth going. If you are thinking about it or you're undecided, I think it's well worth giving it a go.
Yeah, just crack on and do it. And certainly, if you go to Walkabout, the bar there at there's the dance floor downstairs. If you get there roughly about 1 o'clock, 2 in the morning, you will see some sights and possibly some of British Speedway's top stars in a condition that you've never seen them before.
No,
so
extraordinary moments. It's quite a show. Yeah, that's worth £20 alone, mate.
In it. Yeah, I think was it last year or the year before? Somebody said Bartosz Smarslik walked in, and there was Smarslik and was it Nicky Pedersen chatting down on the dance floor there in Walkabout. It all happens. That's the place you need to go for your exclusives. But late at night, and live the dream. Well, look, cheers, Kelv. You'll be back in action in the British League very soon again with Eurosport Monday night. Then you've got the break for the Olympics, have you?
Birmingham on the 22nd. Unfortunately, Ipswich was postponed. So my next outing, I can't remember who's there actually, but I do know that I'm going to Birmingham next Monday. Birmingham not having a great run. I'm looking forward to seeing Freddie Lingren there. Hopefully he can give them a real boost because they haven't had a great run. And to be honest, a lot of their guys have been out of form. Steve Worrell hasn't. Well, Steve Worrell is not even riding. Can't remember.
Yeah, he's ill.
He's ill. So that's tough for him.
Yeah.
I think Pavlicki's had a good go, but it hasn't quite worked out for them. So, but no, we'll get back into the routine of doing that because with the Olympics, we will have a break for a couple of weeks. I think towards the end of July and the early part of August, we won't have domestic meetings, and then we will crack on every week at the conclusion of the Olympics because everything takes a back seat for that. But yeah, we'll be doing that, and then obviously looking forward to the GPs kicking off again in Cardiff.
Yeah, Birmingham Sheffield is your fixture on Monday.
So the champions in town, another tough fixture. We did see Birmingham early in the season when they hadn't won anything, and then they beat Bellevue. We'll see. Sheffield will be a stern test for the home team. So, but I don't see any reason, as long as it's not pouring with rain, I'd like to think it'll be a competitive night.
I was at Perry Bar a week or two ago. Well, the day before the Speedway of Nations, actually, and who else was there? Birmingham's top rider from the past rode 2 or 3 heats from, didn't he? There he was. He's a one-team man, and went back to visit his British spiritual home. But obviously they've got Lambert, haven't they, and Pawlicki and yeah, I think a few of the Polish. Well, I think Dudek turned up as well. A few of them went over for the night, and they were cheering on. They were racing against Oxford, so Janowski was riding, and yes. As Janowski was leading a race, and as they came round, the Polish guys were all stood where the riders watch from, and they were doing like a Mexican wave every time he came round and did a lap. Which
all right, fair play to him.
I think that was probably the peak of Poland's week.
Sure, yes, it was. But Bartosz Swazik, by all accounts, Ian, has been a champion for British Speedway. I think he is encouraging riders to come to the UK. I don't think he's anti it at all. I think he quite likes the idea of guys coming here to experience different conditions, and because there are a lot of kids coming through in Poland that just sit in a seat and just hold it flat out because the tracks are big and wide and slick. And I think he is aware that you can become a one-trick pony very easily doing that, and so he is encouraging some of the youngsters to consider riding here. It certainly is worthwhile. But no, it was interesting. I did see that, actually, seeing him. I saw it. I think on a clip somewhere that he was floating around at Birmingham. And funny enough, unbelievably, I was actually there that night when he did a couple of races, and I thought, well, clearly that influence has been instrumental in his success. So there we are. But no, looking forward to seeing the second half of the season. I think there'll be some twists and turns along the way, I'm sure.
Absolutely, there will. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll catch up again soon. But thanks, Kelv, and I'm glad you enjoyed your trip north. But hopefully you'll be getting some warmer weather down south where you are, because it's looking pretty gloomy here right now.
Yeah, me too.
Brilliant. Okay, stop.